Hi, everyone. Just going to give a second here for everyone to join and get their audio going before we begin. Apologize for the delay. We were waiting for one of our panelists who still has not joined the panel discussion today. But I think, being with farmers, we all know that sometimes there's some things and priorities, and sometimes things come up, and we've got to take care of crops when we can, or get out there when we can when it's not raining. So we'll hopefully she will join us here in a bit, but we wanted to go ahead and get started. Actually, so she just messaged me. She should be joining here momentarily. So I wanted to go ahead and first we'll start. I'll introduce. We're joined today by Devon Wilson, who is the owner and operator of Sunlight Gardens in Battle Creek. Devon has an extensive background in farming in an urban environment. And hopefully here, when Aaron hops on, we're going to be joined by Erin Caudell, who is one of the directors on the Genesee Conservation District Board. And she also has been an urban farmer in the city of Flint for several years. And in many ways has been sort of the go-to person in our community as a resource for all things urban farming. So we've got a great program here today. This is our last live session for the 2021 Virtual Summer Conference. And we hope that you've found the summer conference to be informative and helpful and a little bit inspiring to, maybe give you a little bit more energy as we continue with the important work that we do as conservation districts. So this last session we wanted to say this is something that often when we think of conservation, we tend to think of the historic work that we've done when we think about the creation of soil and water conservation districts in the 30s. And we think of more rural agricultural based operations. But in this case, this conversation is going to be focused on urban environments where, throughout Michigan, we've got a number of communities that are realizing that land in cities can be not only affordable, but also a great accessible way to address our food systems and to reduce our overall carbon footprints. So, we thought it'd be great to have a conversation, and this is gonna be a real informal session to talk a bit about what their experiences have been as urban farmers in terms of challenges and barriers and things that we could potentially address as conservation districts to be better support for our urban farmers. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started, and just want to we'll pitch the first question here to Devon, and just tell us a little bit about your story. So how and why did you get into farming?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Dan. And I will just let you know it's pronounced Devon. It reads Devon, so you're totally fine, bro. It happens especially on the internet when we only met by Zoom. It happens all the time. So
sorry about that.
You're totally fine, man. But yeah, so a little bit about my story. I, born and raised here in Battle Creek, Michigan, which is where the farm is. I see Aaron just jumped in too. Nice. Hey, Aaron. But so yeah, I was born and raised in Battle Creek, Michigan. I grew up in a impoverished community, very similar. It's actually a couple blocks away from where my farm is now. Grew up on Cherry Street, and I was a kid that loved food. You know what I mean? I loved to eat. I loved to snack. That was actually like one of my favorite things to do when I would like earn some money, would be to go to the store. Like me and my friends would go to the store and just buy honey buns, hot Cheetos, the classic things that they have at corner stores and stuff. So as I got a little bit older, I started to realize, that a lot of this food that I was buying and eating, and I enjoyed it, but it wasn't actually healthy for me. It wasn't really making me stronger. It honestly wasn't really giving me the nutrients that I needed. And so I felt kind of betrayed by this. I'm like, dang, like I really love this food, but it tastes good and it's available in the community. It's about pretty much it's the only thing available in our community because we didn't have any fresh produce stores. And so I'm like, wow, this is what we're eating in the community and it tastes good, but it's not healthy for us. And I think, one of the big things that kind of got me thinking like that is I've always seen both of my grandmothers, on my mom's and my father's side, they would always be dealing with health issues. And they both had severe diabetes. They both actually ended up passing away from diabetes. And, you know, come to find out, it was pretty much just because of their diet and their eating habits. You know, it was, they weren't eating foods that were healthy for them. They were eating things that are kind of clogging their arteries and things of that nature. And so they both unfortunately passed away from that. And so, you know, getting older and kind of realizing all this, it made me want to build a relationship with my food, you know? So basically, once I was about 15, I just started to look around for places that I could volunteer and like learn how to build that relationship, because I literally didn't know that food grew in the ground. You know, people can't even believe when I tell them that, but I seriously, you know, I didn't understand how the food got on the shelves. I just went to the grocery store with my mom and we picked up the food, and that was that. So once I got to researching, using the internet, learning, okay, food is grown from a seed, and it's, you know, there's all these different systems that make it possible for us to have food on the grocery stores. I was like, okay, well, I love food. I want to be able to take pride in what I eat and, you know, really have a relationship with my food. So basically, yeah, like I was saying, I started volunteering on Sprout. There was a nonprofit called Sprout Urban Farms, and they actually own the property that I just purchased last year. And you know, I started off with them. We were just cleaning up the lot, like getting ready to turn it into a farm, picking up rocks and trash and stuff like that. So I worked with them for that season. The next season, they could tell that I was kind of passionate about it and I had an interest. So they hired me on, because that was just all volunteer work. So they hired me on. I was making a little bit of money. Then I worked on a couple bigger farms, like Green Gardens here in Battle Creek, just to get more experience, and eventually started my own farm, Sunlight Gardens. And at the first year I started the farm, I was also doing the MSU Organic Farmer Training Program over in Lansing. And so, yeah, you know, that's where I got a lot of my farming knowledge, was from working on bigger farms and going to school. And yeah, you know, when we first started, we were working on anything from just yards that we could grow in to grow enough food to go to market. And then we eventually, you know, fast forward to right now, got 2 acres over in Battle Creek, and we're, you know, doing restaurant sales, market sales. One of my big goals was to have a meal that I completely grew all the food for. And so I've done that now a little bit ago, actually. So yeah, now, you know, we got new goals and we're just looking to expand and things like that. So yeah.
Thanks, Devon.
Yeah.
So Aaron, the same question to you. So tell us about your story. How and why did you get into farming?
Well, I do have some family that farms, so I've always kind of been around a little bit. Like, we knew we had sheep farmers in the family and we visit once a year, but that was kind of it. So it never really was on my radar. I, you know, grew up having a garden or helping my grandma in her garden. And I was really interested in herbs, and made my mom do a herb garden at like 7, which she was like, what is up with this kid? But I did end up in the long term over at Michigan State for horticulture. So was definitely more into landscape horticulture and greenhouse production. And that's kind of where you know, my education background was in. But after I graduated, I got hired by Ruth Mott Foundation to do children's environmental education, which I really enjoyed doing. And then they sort of switched gears, and I ended up working as their outreach person and working with more community gardeners. But being that Flint had a third of their land as vacant, we were trying to find productive reuses, and was really inspired to work with people who were trying to grow their own food, and learned a lot a lot from people who were much better gardeners than I was about production. And eventually worked my way into doing a lot of social justice work in Flint and talking to people, and felt like I was talking to myself when me and some of the other people were saying, we need more farmers, we need more small farmers. If we're going to have food sovereignty, if we're going to have control of our food system, then there needs to be more people growing food so that we can start a local food system and be able to supply restaurants and like all these things I was talking about. It was like, no one actually said, but you know how to grow things till someone actually said that. And my friend Adam Monterey, who worked for Michigan State University in the Hoop Houses for Health program, said, you're helping all these other people get hoop houses. Why aren't you growing? And it was kind of a, like that moment where you're like, yeah, why am I not growing? So my partner, Franklin Pleasant, who has an engineering background, neither one of us farmers, started looking for property and had quite a really hard time acquiring land. We had been granted a grant through Hoop Houses for Health for a hoop house and had to put up a hoop house by August. And we had been denied over 6 different proposals to our land bank for property to farm on, and ended up, like, after being declined and declined, going, okay, what will you sell us? What will you, like, what can we buy? We have this hoop house, we don't want to lose this grant. And they eventually let us buy some property. It's 9.75 acres just outside of the city of Flint in the city of Beecher, which is more of a neighborhood setting, but still like on the edge of the city of Flint, but thankfully has municipal well water, which was a really nice bonus.
So you definitely answered my second question there that I had, was sort of why Flint. So Devon, I'm going to extend this one to you. So why Battle Creek? Why choosing Battle Creek to farm in as opposed to trying to find land elsewhere outside of the city?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, it was pretty much just wanting to offer experiences to kids that grew up like me that I didn't have. You know what I mean? It's pretty much as simple as that. When I was growing up, I actually had to do a lot of research and actually really seek out farming. And like I said, I didn't even know how food was grown or anything. So yeah, for me, it's like, I don't know, I just feel connected. Since I was born here, I want to, basically make the thing in the community that I wanted when I was younger, and so, yeah, and I've traveled to Hawaii. I lived in Hawaii for 3 months. Probably should have stayed over there, but I came back.
So how difficult was it for you to acquire your land in Battle Creek? Did you run into any problems with that process, like Aaron and Franklin's experience in Genesee County?
Yeah, we definitely got the runaround a lot. I feel like the only reason that I have land right now is because I pretty much have about 7-8 years of experience in just doing farming work in Battle Creek. So it kind of got to the point when, like, there finally was like a really, basically like, because I said, I bought the property from the nonprofit that I used to work with. So when they were ready to get rid of their property, I was kind of the first person in their mind, like, well, they knew I was trying to get land and hadn't been successful. I had leased land from them before on this same property. So yeah, it was definitely pretty difficult to work with the land banks. And we actually never ended up even working with the land bank. We just worked with Sprout directly.
So yeah, I just bring it up because I wonder if that might be an opportunity for some of our districts in the future. We've been having a lot of conversations today about partnerships with other local districts as well as other entities. That's been sort of an overall topic in multiple sessions over the last 2 days. So it gets me to think a bit more about the possibilities of districts being able to help maybe some of those new farmers in those communities to maybe help with some of those early processes of getting them connected to help remove some of these barriers for purchasing land. So both of you, you acquired the land. Then what were some other challenges that you encountered in your operation? How did you resolve them? And Aaron, if you want to go ahead and start first on this one.
What kind of direction we think about challenges? Because like every day is a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, we can think about other barriers. We can think about, if it was water systems or irrigation systems or, soil remediation or anything in particular, whatever you want to talk
Sure.
about.
I mean, we had crappy soil. We still have crappy soil. We like have to add a lot of stuff to the soil. We have had to compost to try to add some nutrients to the soil. I mean, it was, even though it was fallow for 25 years, it wasn't a balanced ecosystem. So I feel like we're 8 years in now on this property, and I feel like we are just like sort of getting there. We have 5 hoop houses in production as well as outdoor production. We grow for our CSA and for our grocery store and for our farmers market. And we definitely can't produce enough on what we have going for the demand. I mean, partially COVID related. Our CSA tripled this last season and is still pretty strong. Our CSA is a partnership with 2 other farmers. So we are able to combine stuff combine our products to be able to meet CSA demand, but it still has stretched us. And when you're working in like not ideal soil, I mean, it's a wet area. So being that it was dry, we actually got all tilled before May, which is kind of a miracle, but also that we need our drip irrigation. So we had to learn a lot about our soil and a lot about making it productive. And we've spent a lot of time in growing natives and adding native plants in order to create a more balanced system, which I've had a lot better. I have a lot more insect control when I have a much more balanced system. So we have a lot of predator insects that really help keep things in check. And with the better soil, I don't do a lot of spraying in general, as long as I'm managing my soil. But for us, like capital is probably one of the biggest challenges, like being able to get our land from the land bank, which was nice because it was fairly inexpensive, but there was nothing there. It wasn't like I was buying an established farm. And so we had we were on a waiting list for 6 months to even get water. So we were hauling water in rain barrels from our truck from our house in the city of Flint. And we still don't live on our property because it still needs more infrastructure. We don't have electricity. We go every morning and every night on days that need open. The hoop houses need open. We don't have a cooler on site. We're still 8 years later putting in a lot of infrastructure. And part of that is, we've been lucky enough to be able to access capital improvements through NRCS and Hoop Houses for Health to be able to put in our hoop houses so we could expand our production so we can make more money so we could hopefully access that. But I think, other people who are coming from, places where they can borrow money from their parents or whatever, maybe could have had more infrastructure quicker. So I feel like, my generational farmer friends are very generous with sharing their equipment, but I have definite jealousy.
So Devon, I'll extend the same question to you. So now that you've acquired the land, what were some other challenges you encountered in getting your operation started? How did you resolve them?
Yeah, so I mean, we're still really building our foundation, kind of like Aaron was saying. There's a lot that goes into it, and there's always something you could add or always something you can do. But yeah, the soil, is a big one. This is, our second season here, really like first and a half season, really, because we kind of only got half the year last year. But we have to add compost to all our fields, and that's not cheap. And I guess another you know, a problem that I've been thinking of more recently is like the sustainability aspect of the farm, and kind of what we were talking about a little bit before the panel started, like irrigation, water retention, things like that, like making the best use of our resources, and kind of like how do we make the best use of our resources, you know, and how you know, how is what we're doing affecting the community, you know what I mean? Like our as far as marketing, like, or is what we're actually doing getting into the community. That's something I focus a lot on, is you know, marketing and trying to make sure that we are serving the community that we're in, because we're definitely right in the middle of a neighborhood. And you know, it's pretty easy to pick up and go to the farmer's market and sell some produce, but people from this neighborhood, they can't even make it to the farmer's market, or they don't know what times it's going on, things like that. And I mean, yeah, there's a lot of challenges, you know, like I guess another one would be just like having more help, you know what I mean? Because it's like, it's so important to, you know, build relationships, find these sources. Like I heard Aaron mention the NRCS. I didn't even know what the NRCS was until the beginning of this year, you know, and I've been farming for a while. So, you know, the finding these sources of funding can be challenging. And then, yeah, just having enough staff and people to really get everything, like, it's let alone get everything done that we need to on the farm, but also, you know, marketing, relationship building, things like that. It's so it's like a balancing act, you know, it's like a juggling act. So that's kind of a couple challenges. Yeah.
Sure. So you both are basically in a neighborhood setting. Have you found that your neighbors that are around your farms have been generally supportive? Or have you run into issues with any neighbors through your experiences? And Aaron, or Aaron, I know you're kind of smiling, or whoever wants to take it first.
We've had all kinds of stuff. One thing that we've really struggled with is that the little corner pocket of where we are is a primarily Hispanic area, and the acreage that we worked on, or that we purchased, was in the middle of a lot of family intermingled amongst us. And there is kind of a perceived like care that everything should be mowed very short and mowed 3 times a week. And that was not what we were trying to achieve with our farm. And so we were reported on the township on the regular for just about everything. We've had some very ugly incidents where the police has been called on my partner because he didn't look like he should be the property owner, because why would a Black man own a property on that street? We've had we had the township have to apologize to us because we had to threaten a lawsuit over racial discrimination on our property because of this reporting over and over again. And how the township was handling it was not great. But they didn't have a hoop house ordinance, but they've tried to stop us from building every single hoop house we've put up. And I've, thankfully, being NRCS, I've been able to leverage some political allies who have helped kind of negotiate it. But because they didn't actually have a hoop house policy, and I've shown them there is within the state building code that it's considered an agricultural structure, that it is not a permanent structure, that, we've gone over, and I brought copies of it to the township, and until they wrote something to the contrary, there wasn't anything they could really stop us from doing it. But they were trying to charge us $1,700 a hoop house from not going through their process, which they didn't have. In fact, it's gotten so bad, I've discouraged other people from buying property in our township. There has been a change in leadership that I hope will be a little bit different, but in the end, it kind of ended up that we got grandfathered in. So we've been just keeping our nose down, trying to keep our nose clean, trying to make sure that we're we kind of negotiated with the neighbors that we'd mow this front until the front of our property till a certain spot, and then we could have native areas. We've engaged with the nearby church, which has really helped. The priest has been a really good connection to the community and kind of vouched for us as, we're doing good. We've invited people to the store. We've been, really trying to build relationships that we just kind of didn't really take the time to from the beginning because we were working so hard to get a farm started.
Wow. And I think, you bring up some really interesting points that I think if we were thinking about conservation districts in predominantly rural communities, that these are challenges that farmers there probably have never had to experience, and to something to where they probably don't even think about in some of their communities, because it's just so intuitive to how their local government interacts with farming and agricultural operations in general. And so, and obviously, with these conferences and with the work that MACD does, we talk a lot about the roles of what directors do on boards. And so to me, I think this is another good opportunity for directors to really get involved with their local municipalities, to where if there are municipalities that are pushing back on some of these changes to try to engage in urban farming, that it's a good opportunity for directors to maybe go to some of those township meetings or go to some of those city council meetings and say, hey, I'm an elected official as well, and I'm on this board of directors for the conservation district, and this is what we do, and this is something that's really important to not only protecting our natural resources here in our community, but also this is something that can be an economic opportunity. It's something that can help revitalize neighborhoods. It's something that brings a lot of value to the table. And so this is something that I think we can, when we think about sending a message to directors around the entire state, here's a really good opportunity for directors to sort of be the champions in their community for their clients that that utilize conservation district services, or that maybe haven't yet utilized conservation district services, like in Devon's case here. So Devon, yeah, let's, same question to you. How has your operation been received in your neighborhood? How have neighbors responded to Sunlight Gardens?
Yeah, the neighbors have responded pretty well, to be honest. I'm intentional about trying to get to know our neighbors, and I have a lot of family in this neighborhood. So there's always, kids around and things like that. We try and make it a welcoming environment. Sometimes they can get in the way a little bit and make work take longer than it should. But it's nice because I feel like, I think we're pretty lucky. We haven't really had any crazy thefts or any, backlash from the community necessarily. We got people who, stop by and get a lot of waves when people driving by. People stop by. I think people want to feel connected to it, because it is in the neighborhood and things like that. With the city, we have had a little bit of I think that's our biggest kind of pushback thing, is it's like they're always kind of keeping an eye on what we're doing. Like, make sure we got the grass mowed and everything. We're planning to do an event space inside one of our hoop house, like kind of double one of our hoop houses as an event space, kind of like an agro-tourism, just to raise a little more funds for events and things like that. And they pretty much were like, that's going to be like $10,000 in licensing and inspections and so we're like maneuvering that. So it's been a little challenging with that, but as far as the neighborhood, like we have volunteer days, at least a couple times a year. We get a really good turnout for those and things like that. So, yeah.
So in general, so we talked a little bit about acquiring land and sort of getting the operation going and some of those challenges. So now let's maybe when we think about getting your product to market. So there's this perception in a lot of communities, especially outside of cities and more rural communities, that the soil in urban communities just isn't healthy or it's not clean. How do you get these issues when you go to market? And do you get customers kind of asking these questions with some degree of skepticism? And how do you respond to those who ask these questions? And I think Aaron started last time, so maybe Devon, if you want to respond to this one first.
Yeah, to be completely honest, we haven't had a lot of people inquire about the soil health too much. I don't know if it's just because they're not they don't know what goes into it or anything like that, but usually the questions that we get more is like, do you spray? Are you guys growing organic? Things like that. But we do soil test every year and make sure that our soil is clean. But yeah, I don't know. And it's funny because when I've visited some farms in Detroit, and I don't know if their soil is I don't know if it's similar for Flint either, but I don't know if the soil is like heavily contaminated. I know they deal with a lot of lead issues in Detroit and things like that. But yeah, we haven't really had anything like that out here yet.
So Aaron, have you encountered this at all with any customers or any other folks asking you about the quality of your soil, or have this perception issue with it?
Well, less about the soil and more about the water. Being in Flint with the water crisis, that's been the main question of, do you use Flint water? So because we're on the Beecher municipal system, which is a well water system, I mean, we have tested our water just to be able to say, hey, we tested it and this is, but it's really good water and a lot cheaper than the city of Flint. But it was kind of like a very lucky thing that we were with outside the city limits when we were, because we started farming just a couple of years before the water crisis. So, I think just as a practice, and, if you're working with other farmers or working, to sell food together, we do a lot of soil testing in Flint, and Edible Flint, which is our community gardening group, provides lead testing within the city. So I think because everyone is testing, like people are more trusting of the food because there is that testing that's going on. And so people are able to show tests or being able to say, hey, this group that I'm with has the test on file.
So I've got a couple questions here in the chat. One is for Devon, asking if you sampled for heavy metals in your soil. And then it's sort of a similar question from Nadine up in Saginaw Conservation District, who's asking, what are you testing for, nutrients or contaminants? We've been having discussions in Saginaw Bay Land Conservancy and want to help them with soil testing for potential sites. We haven't narrowed down what they need or want, and it's potential urban farm sites. So.
Yeah, so we were told by the nonprofit that they tested for heavy metals. But we have not tested it ourselves yet. So it was verified that it was safe from them, but yeah, we haven't tested it ourselves. And then as I think the other question, like, what do we test for? We do the MSU soil lab test. So it pretty much just tells you the nutrient level and things like that.
Yeah, when you add on the soil, like the different heavy metals, like adding arsenic and copper and some of those other things that can really add the cost to soil testing. So, working with, if there's a community group that has some money that are able to test some of the, like the broad heavy metals, like at least on your first time testing for your farm, that's what besides lead, which there often is money, especially in urban areas, for lead testing. And whether that's through the health department or through a community group that's helping do testing. But I think through MSU, but it was like every time you added another heavy metal, it added another $15 to the cost. So that's not something we're going to like do every year. But when we first encountered our soil, we did.
Nice.
So with that, another question too from Albert Jones and NRCS said, what kind of conservation practices are being used on your farms? Whomever wants to respond to that first, go ahead.
I can start. Yeah, we thanks to Dan got introduced to Jeremiah, and I've been working with the meat program to figure out, where we need to improve our practices and things like that, getting our emergency plan and everything like that settled in. So yeah, we're pretty much just getting started. That was kind of one of our challenges, is like, how can we be more conservative and sustainable and use our resources to the best of our ability?
So we are meat verified at Flint Ingredient Company, and we're a couple of years ago. It took us, we did the meat pre-walk probably 3 or 4 years before that, before we really even had a lot of hoop houses going on our farm. And it was really helpful to kind of do that and learn what we could work towards. And as we planned and started record keeping, like what we needed to do to eventually get meat certified, because at first it was kind of feeling overwhelming to do all of that at once as we were starting our farm. So I'm glad we kind of did it in where we did in the startup of our farm. And then we've since added 3 NRCS hoop houses. With Genesee County being part of the hoop house program, we kind of had more access to hoop houses than some other places maybe have at different times. But I would say we've had a really hard time finding conservation programs that we could be a part of as beyond equipped. I kind of ran into some struggle with, before I was part of the district in Genesee County, trying to read through and see what would fit into our farm or what our farm fits into the practice or which way it goes. And I have to say I was discouraged with, I would call up some people at the district and say, hey, I'm interested in this. And I would be discouraged. I'm like, I don't understand if this fits to my size farm because it's in acres. Does this apply to small farms? And often I was discouraged from even applying for a practice. So it was more work on my end trying to read through, and they'd be like, well, and I say, hey, does there anything that fits for my farm? And they'd be like, well, read through. And I'm like, I read through it, but it's a different language and I don't speak this. And so I really, at the time we were grazing sheep on our property, trying to raise the nutrient levels of our soil. And I think there could have been a lot of practices we would have been eligible for. But because we weren't big acreage, because there was a definite, I think, training gap between the district and me as a small suburban farmer, I think there wasn't that translation that needed to happen. Since becoming part of the district, and I became part of the district to try to understand the district and understand how some of these practices could be applied to smaller farms, to urban farms, to beginning farmers who are trying to figure out this language of the district and NRCS and all of these things. It's taken a long time to try to figure out what might have applied to our farm at different times and what does apply now. So I think there are things that we might do in the future, but there's also what do you want to add to the daily of farming at different times? And during a pandemic, none.
on top of running a store, on top of running a market stall, on top of having young children, yeah. It's a lot for sure.
Yeah.
So no, I'm always, I have to say, Aaron, I'm always continually inspired by you in Franklin in terms of what you're able to accomplish and get done, and always appreciative to have you here in our community. And leading to my next question, which you kind of already touched on a little bit, Aaron, but maybe if you can think of what are some other areas where you could use more assistance, or what are some areas where you think urban farmers in general could be better assisted by their local conservation districts?
So I kind of have this thing about how do we flip the script so that conservation district people can look at not just talking about the farm and what the farmer wants to do with the farm in the long term. I mean, we have 4 acres of woods. There's something that's going to fit in there that could be somehow matched up to a practice, but not being able to articulate what our future plans for that, I think has limited what practices maybe have been suggested to me. So like thinking and having those conversations, building the relationship, I mean, it all comes down to building a relationship with the farmer, and especially with a farmer who may not have that generational language of farming. And, I'd like this to be a native area. Well, is there a practice that might fit? Have you ever considered having beehives on your farm? Is there, can we do an improvement to, that would fit in with a potential practice? So trying to really think about how to and I think that the hesitation comes in and is not suggesting practices to farmers. And so how can we change the conversation to get to, here's an array of practices that could possibly work in your farm in the future based on our conversations, and how do you get there? Because I think it does, NRCS feel, and the practices feel like such a huge thing that is really seems overwhelming. And when you hear about the record keeping, the paperwork, it sometimes is a barrier beyond what a new farmer or a farmer who doesn't know the system is willing to take on. And so really trying to find ways to build those bridges to be able to have those conversations with farmers and help them find what might work for their farm.
Great. Thanks, Erin. That's a great response. And Devon, so same question to you. So what are some areas where you could use more assistance, or where do you think urban farmers could be better assisted by conservation districts?
Yeah. I definitely agree with Erin a lot. I think the outreach and the relationship building is huge. Before, you hit me up, and I literally had no idea what a conservation district was. And so I think that was, awesome for me to learn, and I'm still learning about it, and learning how we can get involved. So yeah, I think, basically I would have to really agree with Erin, kind of looking at, working with the farmer, and then looking at our property. Like I said, this is like a foundational year for us. So looking at our property, how, we're beautifying the land. How can we incorporate pollinator plants and native plants, and how does that incorporate with the conservation program? So yeah, I think that would be very helpful, because even just meeting you introducing me to Jeremy, that has been so helpful already. So that was just a couple months ago. So I think just continuing that would be awesome.
So I think it kind of goes into what you both said about building the relationships. So as another follow-up conversation or topic here is really, how as districts, we're always constantly trying to think of how can we better connect with our constituencies? How can we reach a wider audience? How can we get our message out there? What are some ways that you think that maybe conservation districts can better connect, not only with the traditional audiences that they work with, but also with really the marginalized communities that exist within our districts? So I think, Erin, you started the last one. I don't know, Devon, if you want to respond to this one first, or
yeah. So kind of just to rephrase, ways that you guys could better engage with the community in farming. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if we would have been approached at the farmers market, and if there's an agent going around talking to farmers, hey, these are some programs that we have, what are your guys' needs? Because that was, that was pretty much the start of my farming journey, was going to the market and getting involved, and that is an easy way to connect with farmers. Beyond that, I mean, I don't know, getting maybe into schools and things like that. I was definitely interested in farming when I was kind of in 10th, 11th grade is when I first started getting interested. So maybe, kind of possibly getting some of that information out in the schools and a little more marketing. Because I mean, the way we met was so random, through a mutual friend, basically. So it's that was pretty, I feel lucky. So yeah, I mean, kind of long story short, meeting farmers where they already are at.
I think I totally agree with you as well, but I think there's also some opportunities with some of the work that the districts are doing around rain gardens and other water retention uses. And like, I think that those really apply and are useful in an urban setting, and being able to kind of match what like getting involved, the districts getting involved in their urban areas and being able to apply some of the, like, I know there are funds out there for conservations to districts to do things like that, and whether it's native plantings or rain gardens or things like that. And that's a great way, I think, to kind of work in your community and start building relationships where the community, you know, meeting people where they're at, but that's where community is. And doing projects like that will always unearth people who are really interested in that sort of thing. So I think they're real, like, and that's such a win-win-win-win-win thing with, you know, improving the community where we work, getting new relationships, showing the community we're interested in the area where they live, and you know, trying to improve things like that the district already does and does well. So I think that there's a lot of places that could be beneficial.
And I'm glad you brought up the point of water retention. Just thinking yesterday, we had a session with Dr. David Perot from Western University, Western Michigan University. And he touched a bit about is business as usual with climate change, and that essentially on the current track that we're on, that we could be looking at 30 days of, I think it was less rain, if I'm recalling correctly on the information. And so water retention is going to be one of those issues that's going to become increasingly important every year that goes on from here on out. The more we think about water retention as a whole, I think is an issue that's going to be really critical for all conservation districts to really continue to focus on. But with that, we've got time for a couple more questions, so I'm going to try to wrap it up here before hopefully we might go a little over 5 here, but this is the last live session for today of the conference. So just wanted to move on to the next question too for Devon. You've successfully recruited, you know, a lot of young people from your community to come and help out on your farm. And you've really seemed to build excitement among them around farming and gardening. What worked for you? What was the secret to your success in that?
That's a good question. I mean, I think honestly, just being genuine. You know, I mean, this is really a passion of mine, and I mean, it's my whole life basically. So where I'm coming from, it's pretty unique because there's not a lot of. I'm pretty sure I'm, you know, one of the only Black farmers in Battle Creek, possibly the only Black farmer in Battle Creek, which to me is a problem. You know, we need more Black farmers. So for me, it's kind of like I look at that as not a disadvantage, but an advantage, right? Like I have an opportunity to inspire other people that can relate with me and that, you know, grew up like me to farm. And so I think, yeah, the way I do that is just being intentional about having volunteer days, trying to, you know, it definitely has been challenging because like I said earlier, like, so I have a lot of youth that, like you said, that help out. And some of them are ages, you know, like 6 to 10. And there's some that are like, you know, 15 to 18, 20. And so like that 6 to 10 range, it's like they want to help, but most of the time they're like getting in the way more than they're helping. And then the 16 to 20-year-olds, they're like ready to go, like they're ready for some action. So balancing that has been difficult, but I think just remaining patient and kind of always thinking about the long-term vision of like creating that's a part of our mission at Sunlight Gardens, is creating a talent pool of young farmers and specifically young Black farmers. So with that mission in mind, it's always like, okay, even though they're kind of getting in the way, hey, they're on the farm, they're enjoying it. So let's turn this into a learning experience and make the best of it. So, yeah.
That's great to hear. And I think especially bringing up the issue of just Black-owned farms, is that this is a real issue in America that over the last 3 decades, we've seen a substantial decline just in the last 30 years of Black-owned farms. And it kind of goes into a good question here that was asked by Brian Talsma in the chat, that he said that, you know, farmers are already struggling to stay afloat given the current crop prices. and so when we think about all these other variables and all these other challenges that urban farmers have to go through, I mean, how do you make ends meet, especially when trying to keep prices affordable in a low-income community? So maybe Aaron, we can kind of start with you on that one. Put you
So,
on the spot.
Devon, I hoped you'd figured it out. I mean, for us, it's actually really important that at farmers market we are charging, market rate. And I know that we could probably get better prices in our south in the Detroit suburbs, but that's not home for us. So, our work has always been based around food access in Flint and trying to make sure that people have the best opportunity to make healthy choices that they can. And so that's not always profitable. And, I think they're sometimes a struggle more than others, but it's been a hard year and a half. And the one way that we've really kind of branched out in hopes that our CSA, as we actually have 4 drop-off sites. You can pick up here at our store in Flint, you can pick up at another farm in Grand Blanc, or we have drop-offs at partner businesses in both Fenton and Clarkston. So as we found that there's more money in Fenton and Clarkston, we have some additional members, and we're able to bring that money to go to work in Flint. So sometimes, like, I can't physically go to another market because we cannot divide into more people, but that's our way of like entering a market where there is demand. And, we have sold to other restaurants when things were happening in that area too. So sometimes we can do a loop and drop off food at restaurants down in that area. And, again, continue to build a market for our product elsewhere. But it's really hard to toe the line when there's wholesalers at the market reselling product that is super cheap, and but finding, just kind of holding the line and having our heirloom tomatoes, and they're $4 a pound, and they're beautiful tomatoes, and the people who complain about it aren't your customers, and that's okay, because you also have quarts of cheaper tomatoes. And so just trying to find that balance, and trying to, I want Flint people to be discretionary eaters of delicious things. So trying to provide that and at least have the opportunity for people to experience it or see something they've never seen before, and not like just trying to have cheap things to sell. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely still figuring it out too, I guess being creative, we're trying to be as creative as possible. We're adding about like 3 to 4 potential new streams of revenue this year. We're going to be getting into microgreen production. We're going to set up some space so that next year we'll be able to sell transplants in the beginning of the year. And we're actually looking to do some compost and fertilizer production, as well as kind of the agro-tourism I touched on a little bit earlier, but in the event space, and so just trying to, be resourceful, like my mentor always tells me, like, be resourceful. So trying to, use what we already have and figure out how to make the most of it. We're getting into value-added products. We just put in a tea garden, so we're going to be drying and packaging some tea, things like that. So it's just, I like to consider myself an innovative person, so we're always trying to look for different ways that we can kind of be resourceful. But yeah, and then that kind of, brings me back to what I was saying about all the youth that we have involved. It's like, we're at a point now where we have to start, we're growing, we're getting busier. So we do have to start being intentional about the time that we're spending. So we're working as well to do some things like offering programs to where the kids can come out for a certain time of the day, actually receive like a little stipend and learn, leadership training, confidence training, communication skills, and farming, things like that. And yeah, so it's it's wild trying to stay afloat, but I love it. You know, it's like it's fun too. So
As I don't personally, I've never had an agribusiness, but as a former small business owner, I can certainly relate, and I certainly understand it of the juggling. But I can only imagine it's multiplied when you have all the other variables involved when you're growing your own food. So at this point, I think I want to start wrapping things up since we're a little over 5 o'clock here, and just I wanted to make one comment in that I really hope that the objective of this conversation was to help conservation districts around Michigan understand what the needs are that exist out there, and how we can turn some of those needs into opportunities to where, when we think about some of the folks that are on this call, we've got folks that work for MDARD, we've got folks that work for NRCS, we've got folks that work for local districts. And when we meet and collaborate and talk about larger projects, we can turn some of these needs into real opportunities as districts to help find the funding, and hopefully that can be through partnerships and through different programming at both the state and federal level, to where we can really help address maybe some of these barriers and just some of these issues that come up, because ultimately, in the big thing in the context of the climate crisis, we think a lot about localizing food systems and just how critically important that is. So to me, I kind of leave this as a challenge to the rest of our colleagues in the conservation district community around Michigan to continue to think about how we can turn the need into an opportunity. And I think that the more that we sort of frame it in this mindset, the more opportunities that we can create across the board. So with that, I want to give you both an opportunity. If you have any final thoughts or comments you'd like to add, if you want to take 30 to 60 seconds, just to say anything else that's on your mind that you want to share to the audience.
Go ahead, Devon.
all right, Sunlight Gardens, Battle Creek. You can find us on Facebook. My Instagram page is Devon is Wilson. And we post a lot more pictures and stuff on Instagram, but then we do like our kind of events and things on Facebook. So yeah, you can learn a little bit more about us there. Thank you for having me on the panel, man. I really appreciate the opportunity. And, I'm excited to just continue working with conservation districts.
I just wanted to mention, like, one of the resources that has really come in handy for us and have been really great partners is MIFS, and the work that they do with women in ag and with farmers of color. They have been great allies for us in just opening up resources and letting us know when things or when we can't figure it out, to like give us the secrets in. Their Family Farms Conference is actually one of the best networking events and feels like family for us each year. So if you're not going to that, I really suggest that. That's a really great place to go. And then I forgot the other thing I was gonna say, but thanks. I really appreciate meeting you, Devon, and thanks, Danny, for inviting us. And check out the local grocer, follow our Facebook page. We also have Killer Friday dinners, so we make food every Friday for people. We have a regular grab and go, but that's been our pivot for the pandemic, is to make food on Fridays for a family meal. So check us out.
Well, great. Well, thank you both so much for taking time out of your busy days to join us. I think this was a really enjoyable and interesting conversation. And we just dropped in the chat there a link to both Sunlight Gardens as well as the local grocer. Definitely encourage our members to check them out and give them a like on social media and help support them in what they do. So again, thank you both so much for joining us. And with that, want to have everyone enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you for participating in the 2021 MACD Virtual Summer Conference. All right.
Awesome.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Dan.